order. Mike, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we always do, we'll begin our meeting by approving minutes of previous meetings, beginning with the January 14, 2013 work session.
And I will go right ahead and make a motion to approve those minutes.
Second. It's been moved by Mike, seconded by Dick. All those in favor? Aye.
I will abstain.
I'll abstain.
Okay, those minutes are approved. Second, we have the regular Select Board meeting of January 14, 2013, as corrected by Mr. Lewis.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
It's been moved by Dick, seconded by Mike. All those in favor? Aye.
Again, I will abstain.
Those minutes are approved. And finally, the non-public meeting minutes of January 14, 2013.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Been moved by Dick and seconded by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those minutes are approved.
Lastly, I'll abstain one more time.
Okay, announcements. The Select Board will meet on the following dates. Regular meetings at 6 p.m. on Monday, February 11, 2013, and February 25th, 2013. Work review sessions prior to the regular meeting will start at 5 p.m. A second budget hearing, if needed, will be held on Thursday, February 7, 2013, at 6 p.m. Petitioned warrant articles will be read at the February 7, 2013 public hearing, and all of these meetings will be held at the Town Hall unless otherwise posted. Weather observations for the month of December are available in the Town Hall, and citizens wishing to be listed on the Selectmen's agenda should notify the Town Hall before 12 p.m. on the Friday before the scheduled meeting. Thank you. Moving on with our agenda, first up we have David Kent to discuss planning board activities. Mr. Kent.
First. This way you want?
Yes, please.
Don't recognize you without your hat.
Thank you. I'm not wearing it anymore, so...
Next year.
Yeah, next year.
Do you still have it?
Not that I understand.
Yeah.
I'm appearing here as a citizen, and what I have to say is somewhat complicated. So I guess what I'd like to do is to make a complete statement, which would probably take about 12 minutes. And after I finish, ask whatever questions you might have, or ask me to repeat anything that I might have said. Is that okay? As a way to go forward, thank you. So I'm here as a member of the public with an interest in recent activities of the planning board as they relate to the environmentally sensitive zone along the Baker River, but I'm not here to challenge the decisions of the planning board. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because you hire and supervise the town planner and you appoint members to the planning board. How you accomplish those tasks has an impact upon the land use planning process in our town. Probably no different than you folks, I want to have confidence that the trust placed in the members of the planning board and the town planner is being fairly exercised. The town has committed itself to land use planning by writing and revising a master plan and enacting a zoning ordinance. To enforce the pieces of that legislation, the planning board has a process to follow and judgments to make. When the process appears fouled, confidence in their judgment, in the judgments is shaken. For me, recent events have shaken that trust, and let me explain why. Let's look at the sequence of events since last summer. Starting way back at July 5th, abutters were noticed about a two-lot subdivision called Riverside Landing for a meeting to be held on July 19th, which is the third Thursday, and that's the regular meeting on which planning boards have their regular meeting. That's a good start. On July 19th, the developer asked to postpone the hearing, and notice said a site plan application was noticed. That was an error. On July 23rd, the planner is quoted in the news.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but say that again. On 7/19,
The developer asked to postpone the hearing, and the notice said the site plan application was noticed. Well, it wasn't a site plan application, it was a subdivision application, so a mistake was made there. On July 23rd, the planner is quoted in the newspaper as saying the proposed subdivision meets all of the town ordinance requirements, and there's no application at that time. What's stated is a matter of fact and yet has yet to be determined by the planning board. Therefore, it appears that this matter was, when considered, has been prejudged, and that's a secondary in my view. On August 2nd, the abutters notice for a site plan review continued from 7/19, from July 19th. What is being continued? A notice about a non-meeting, and it's now a site plan review rather than a subdivision, is a third error. On August 10th, a butters notice explains that it supersedes the previous notices due to a clerical error, and a site plan review will be held August 23rd, which is the fourth Thursday. This is a double or perhaps a triple error in this particular case. First, it acknowledges that a prior error occurred. Second, it violates a policy stated on the town's website that applications will be received only at the board's regular meetings, and those occur on the third Thursday of each month. This was the fourth Thursday of the month. And it's a site review, or is it a site plan review or a two-lot subdivision? We're still up in the air over that. You can go to the town website if you want to see that quotation. It's right under the planning board. On August 10th, an abutter was noticed so that the project was not noticed, so the project was postponed until September 20th, which is a regular meeting to be held in September. On August 16th, an abutter notice stating that the application for two-lot subdivision will be held August 30th. That's the fifth Thursday of the month. Again, we violate the board's policy, and now we have a subdivision that will be heard in advance of a regular meeting and not at the regular meeting. The date was changed, came forward, it was advanced. I raised the issue with the August 30th meeting, that the website says the 30th is when regular meetings are held, the third Thursday of the month is when regular meetings are held. It says that's when applications can be received, and we are not meeting on that day. The board went ahead anyway. The issue that it wasn't posted in the Record Enterprise, but rather it was posted in the Sun, the Laconia Sun, was raised. Again, the board went ahead, accepted the application, and tabled it until the 20th of September, which was then subsequently changed to September 6th, which is the first Thursday of the month. Probably error number 8. Citizens of the town who may be trying to follow the activities of the planning board cannot follow the meeting schedule, and particularly so when the meeting is advanced rather than retarded. So what's the rush? Well, what is most important, being pushed by a developer to advance this project or simply follow the rules? And we can debate that issue. I'll interject also that the use of the Laconia Sun as a vehicle for public notices does a disservice to this community. 600 plus papers of the Record Enterprise go directly into the homes of Plymouth and are regularly read. Many of our town boards, as well as neighboring towns, use the Record Enterprise for these notices. The Laconia Sun has no home delivery, and if you pick it up, it's difficult to find the notices. Recently, the planning board advertised a public notice in the Record Enterprise. And when asked about why a change back, the response was that the planning board wanted everyone to know about the meeting. Well, on September 6th, the first Thursday, the August 30th hearing, previously noticed on September 20th, was continued, closed to public comment. The plan was approved with a list of conditions that had to be met. Public hearing with no public right to speak. If you think what I've just reiterated is confusing or difficult to follow, consider how those who have an interest in such matters seem lost, angry, or frustrated. Another important example. Petitioned articles for amendments to the zoning ordinance can be submitted between November 12th and December 12th of this year. Petitions were filed on November 15th. The planning board was aware that business would have to be held at the December 20th meeting. Why? Because the state statute says very clearly At the next regularly scheduled meeting after the petition period ends, the planning board shall consider those petitions and set a date for a hearing. The planning board met on November 15th, at their work session on December 6th. The period ended on which you could file a petition amendment. And on December 20th, the board canceled the regularly scheduled meeting. It had no business to do. Well, there was business to do. And it happens to be my business, as well as one of the people who signed one of those petitions. As did dozens of other Plymouth citizens, it was their business too. And they canceled the meeting. Well, big deal, they canceled the meeting. Well, it's an important cancellation, and I'll try to explain why. December 21st, the developer who was doing Riverside Landing came forward with a conceptual plan asking for a design review. On December 31st, the notice of a public hearing for that design review was sent out. This notice goes out quickly. The consequences to the citizens who filed the petition articles are dire and significant. For whichever notice goes out first has consequences. If the notice of the petition articles goes out first, the town voters will get a chance to see if they want to change the standards, which would in fact apply to that development. But if the notice of the developer's request goes out first, those things are grandfathered and could go on for 2 years under the same standards that under which he applied for those development. So it is important. The planning board had known since mid-November that they had to do this, and they could have done it on December 20th, and they didn't. January 3rd, the board considered the petition amendments and set January 22nd as the date when they were going to do that. That occurs after the hearing at which the development review, the design review, would take place. On January 10th, they published the notice about the amendments. On the 11th, they sent an invitation out to all the people who live in the environmentally sensitive zone to attend the meeting if they wanted to. On January 17th, a regular meeting on discussion of the design review for Riverside Landing took place. I had received a letter from the town planner that says we're going to receive public comment. You can come and you can talk if you want. The result, got to the meeting, no public comment was allowed. There were townspeople who wished to comment. They became angry when they were not permitted to speak at the meeting. They were told they could submit their comments in writing. On January 22nd, a hearing was held on the amendments to the zoning ordinance. There was a police presence at that meeting. There was writing on the board, and the chair of the board stated that people would be escorted from the room if they didn't behave civilly. I point out when we had the Walmart discussions, we had to move the meeting down to the senior center, right, exactly. I'm not sure if police were there. I didn't see any police there. They took comments. People were all over the map in terms of how they felt about that particular development. We didn't have to have a police officer sitting in the back of the room and a warning that we're going to be taken out of the meeting. So what issues do I bring? Well, I've got a few things I can say. It would seem that the way things are managed and the comments that are made, we've thrown the debate of land use planning out the window and manipulate the process and rules, as one selectman said, to expedite projects. It seems like the scales are unfairly tipped in favor of an applicant and against the wishes of the town as expressed by the voters in the master plan and in the ordinances. What's the evidence of this? Meetings are scheduled on an ad hoc basis, violating the planning board's stated meeting times and all to accommodate a developer. Cancellation of a mandatory meeting that de facto exempts the developer from any changes in the ordinance. Inconsistencies in how the board does things. I'll give you 2 examples. I could give you more, but I'll give you 2. The board has a policy against reading letters in an open meeting. Yet they read the letter that was grossly inaccurate and disparaging towards the bachelors who live here in town, yet would not read the bachelor's response to that letter. They wouldn't read my letter criticizing the moving of the meeting, which was really a special meeting, and yet the last meeting they read a letter from the Fletchers, talking against a proposal that was made. The board grants subdivision approval to a developer. Well, they can and should do that if all the criteria are met. Yet before those approvals are granted, before the approvals are granted, 60,000 cubic yards of fill are removed from the environmentally sensitive zone, the floodway or the floodplain, before the conditions which were imposed in the plan are met. In fact, I believe that those conditions still are not met. And you've all driven by it, and you can see what's going on out there, and we don't have the conditions that were of approval met yet. Fifth, the planning board members regularly remark that they should approve projects to raise the tax base. That's not their responsibility. Their job is to enforce the town ordinances and state statutes consistent with the master plan and zoning ordinance. In fact, the board has a statutory duty to develop an interest in the master plan. The citizens several times and in every update of the master plan have reiterated that it is the rural character of the town that is most important to them, and they based their planning and zoning ordinances on that presumption. It's a fair balance that the board seems not to care about. The board abuses the processes in favor of the applicant. Watch the recording. You take the time, watch the recording of the January 17th meeting. You'll see the first applicant has what some members of the board view as an incomplete application. Yet, the board accepts the application when it's the applicant's responsibility to present a completed application, not the responsibility of the board to fill in the blanks. So here's what I hope you'll do. First, if you've given a directive to the planning board and the planner is to do all it can to raise the tax base of the town, restructure that request consistent with the wishes of the community as expressed in the master plan. Go back to creating a balanced approach. Second, explain to the town planner that process ought not be ignored in favor of expediency. Third, set a policy that the Record Enterprise is to be the newspaper of local circulation used for public notices. If this causes delays, let those delays favor the citizens. Fourth, appoint members to the planning board who have respect for the land use planning process and who will take a balanced approach in their judgments, following the master plan and ordinances. And fifth, someone should apologize for the illegally canceling of a meeting on December 20th that resulted in shutting down the voice of local citizens who wanted to petition their town in an orderly manner. Thank you. That's
May I have a copy of that, please?
sure. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. And we're not going to obviously respond to this lengthy
I know, it's probably
comment
longer,
right now.
probably longer than you wanted, but when you get writing, you know how it is, Mike.
Shut up.
I would like to just say that the scheduled planning board meeting for December 20th, is that the date, was postponed to another date because there had been an error in the posted and published notice, and for absolutely no other reason.
Our business wasn't even on the agenda, though.
There was no, the meeting was not held. I mean, it was as if we held a select board meeting and we didn't have a quorum show up for the meeting, and we had important business to discuss, but we couldn't discuss it because it wouldn't have been legal to do so. Because that had not been posted and published correctly, it would have been illegal to hold the meeting. But that's the only thing that I'm commenting on at this time. And I thank you for taking the time to...
Anybody else want to take a shot? Go right ahead.
Dave, one thing that sort of stuck out at me here is that I've heard you say 2 or 3 times that this was a clear statutory violation, that hearing on the petition warrant articles did not occur on December 20th, which was the next scheduled meeting.
Regularly scheduled meeting.
And one of the times you said it was immediately after within 2 minutes after John Radigan said that there was nothing wrong with that it's common practice to have these meetings somewhere in the middle of January. And he went through the statutory framework pretty clearly in his summary there, but I haven't heard you show us what the statutory violation is.
Okay.
So if you could supplement that
Yep. I can tell you
by
right now.
showing us.
I can tell you right
I
now.
have a feeling that whatever it is going to be a matter of some interpretation, though.
No.
Because our town, so you're saying our town
He's wrong.
attorney is wrong?
He's wrong.
Okay,
He's
that's
dead
what I
wrong.
was wondering if you would
Clearly
say.
wrong. I mean, this isn't even a close call.
And
Well,
he's,
I would as soon not get into a debate about it right now,
No,
but if
I-
you
I
could
can very-
provide the...
Without insulting anybody, I can very easily explain it to you. The board has the authority to set the hearing.
this is
on-
what I want you to do, Dave.
Yeah.
Show us the statutory violation. If you could write it down and send it in
send it,
tomorrow,
okay.
I'd like to see it.
Okay.
You mentioned section 674 dot something another earlier. What section is it that you're referring to?
For that problem,
Yes.
it's in the letter there, but I'll dig it out here.
I didn't hear it in the letter. I must have missed
I
it.
didn't bother to, no, I wasn't going to bother to recite the statute.
It's here.
Oh.
It's in here. It's in these
I
notes.
just think it would be helpful to us if we just knew what section you were referring to.
It says RSA 675:4, method of enactment by petition, the planning board at its
He's got
first
the-
regular meeting following the petition shall set the date of the public hearing for each petition amendment which is received. Okay?
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, take the time to write it
Thank
down.
you.
Okay, and just kind of as a follow-up to that discussion, with regard to the outcome of the January 22nd public hearing concerning those 3 petition warrant articles to amend the zoning ordinances, it is the consensus of the majority of members of the Select Board that we support the position taken by the Planning Board on those matters. So, moving on with our agenda, under updates and recommendations, we have the decisions that we've made on the amounts to be, by which we will propose to fund the nonprofit agencies, and I will go through those. The American Red Cross granted $800. Katie, Communities for Alcohol and Drug-Free Youth, granted $6,000. Genesis Behavioral Health, $7,500. Grafton County Senior Citizens Council, $15,000. Pemmy Baker Home Health and Hospice, $15,000. Bridge House, $10,000. Pemmy Youth Center, $3,000. Plymouth Regional Chamber of Commerce, $2,600. Tri-County Community Action, $4,300. Voices Against Violence, $4,000. CASA, or Court Appointed Special Advocates for Children, $800. Mid-State Health Center, $6,000. And finally, the Waterville Valley Region Chamber of Commerce, $795, for a total of $75,795. We have 5 minutes to the public hearing, so I'm going to move ahead to Chairman's comments. Draft copies of the fiscal year 13-14 budget will be available after 10 a.m. on Wednesday, January 30, 2013, at the Town Hall. And I would also like to extend a congratulations to the cast and crew of Marking the Moment for their terrific performance over the past week, and for providing a great kickoff to the celebration of Plymouth's 250th year. And I would encourage everyone to log on to plymouth250.org and learn about events that are planned throughout this 250th year of ours. So, thank you. And special recognition to my fellow Select Board member who played a prominent role in the performance, as well as to Tim Keefe, who was...
Who was a
also-
real actor?
He was a real actor. But that was... And that is really what we have until we, 5 minutes from now, start the public hearing, so... Pardon me? Want to take a 5-minute break? That would be fine.
These are Hannaford.
And it is 6:30, so I will convene the public hearing concerning the fiscal year 13-14 municipal budget. And I'd just like to start this public hearing by thanking the Budget Advisory Committee and all of our town department heads for their hard work in putting this together. We will go through the budget page by page. However, I would first draw your attention to page 25, where we have the bottom line, and it shows pretty clearly that this year's budget is $184,971.37 over the current year budget. Under. Pardon me, under.
Nice attention getter.
I know.
Everybody's listening.
But one thing I'd also like to point out is that, this budget does reflect some sacrifices to things that are probably going to be needed going forward here in the town. So while, it's been kept at bare bones, and again, I commend everyone for their hard work in achieving that, it's not something that can last forever. We have roads, we have buildings, we have projects that are going to need attention in the future that we're going to need to start paying attention to soon. But having said that, I will go through the budget page by page, and if anyone has questions on any item on a particular page, please feel free to question or comment. If you do have anything to say, please state your name and whether you are a Plymouth resident or your position, if that's appropriate. So beginning with page 1, are there any questions or comments? There being none, we will move on to page 2. Has anyone any questions or comments on page 2? There being none, we will move on to page 3. Questions or comments on page 3? Being none, we will move on to page 4. Are there any questions or comments on page 4? Hearing none, we will move on to page 5. Any questions or comments on page 5? Hearing none, we will move on to page 6. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, we will move on to page 7. And I would like to point out that on page 7, the very first line, 4197211-01, where it indicates North Country Council, that will be changed in the final draft of the budget to Regional Planning Commission, because there is a chance that Plymouth will move from the North Country Council to the Lakes Region Planning Council during this fiscal year. So we'll just make that a generic line title, but the amount will stay the same. Any questions or comments on page 7? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 8. Any questions or comments on page 8? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 9. Any questions or comments on page 9? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 10. Any questions or comments on page 10? Hearing none, we will move on to page 11. Any questions or comments on page 11? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 12. Any questions or comments on page 12? Hearing none, we will move on to page 13. Any questions or comments on page 13? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 14. Any questions or comments on page 14? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 15. Any questions or comments on page 15? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 16. Any questions or comments on page 16? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 17. Any questions or comments on page 17? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 18. Any questions or comments on page 18? Hearing none, we will move to page 19. Any questions or comments on page 19? Hearing none, we move on to page 20. Any questions or comments on page 20? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 21. Any questions or comments on page 21? Hearing none, we'll move to page 22. Any questions or comments on page 22? Hearing none, we'll move to page 23. Any questions or comments on page 23? Hearing none, we'll move to page 24. Any questions or comments on page 24? Which brings us to page 25. Hearing no comments on 24. Any questions or comments on page 25? All right, hearing none, I will consider this budget hearing closed. And I thank everyone very much.
Madam Chair, if I could add my thank you to the town administration. The excellent use of labels, column headers, color, and highlights has made this budget the most readable and easiest to understand in my time on the select. I appreciate the work the town staff has done.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Anybody else like to add anything?
No?
All right. Well, in that case, at this time, we move to committee reports.
I have nothing to report.
I have nothing to report.
Nothing to report.
Planning board meeting, a couple in the last couple of weeks regarding the warrant articles and various site plan and other development options or opportunities before the board. One hearing was continued, and there'll be some other follow-up on the Tenny Mountain Highway project.
Thank you very much. And I have nothing to report. And reaching that point, I would request a motion to go into a non-public session in accordance with RSA 91-A:3, 2, parentheses, A through I.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Ray, seconded by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
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 Sorry, I was distracted.
We are in non-public.